Hello and welcome to another episode of the EV Charging Podcast. We're back for another month. I'm Jeff Sykes.
And I'm Dan Carson, and we are from Solar Choice, Australia's #1 quote comparison platform for all things home electrification and your go-to consultants for all things strata electrification. What's happening this episode, Jeff?
This month we're speaking with Chargefox, and anyone that drives an EV or has driven an EV will likely have this app on their phone. They're a very famous company, and that's because they operate one of the larger DC fast charging platforms across Australia. Their software is powering many of the public charging spots that you'll see on the freeways. And we've lined up a great representative, Rohan Smith.
That's right. Rohan's joining us. He's the head of partner success at Chargefox and brings a lot of experience in the energy industry, more than 15 years behind the scenes. We can't wait to get into a conversation, learn a little bit more about what's happening at Chargefox and what they're looking forward to in the future, but particularly digging into their data. With such a large public charging network, they have a lot of information on what people are doing, how they're interacting with chargers, which of course can paint a picture for us about what's coming up in the near future. Let's welcome Rohan. Welcome, Rohan. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a bit of an interesting episode today. We've got 3 guests in 3 different places, all recording remotely. Jeff joining us from the USA, and Rohan in Melbourne, myself in Sydney. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jeff. Great to be on the show.
Nice to have you here, Ron.
Maybe just to get things started, you could give us a little bit of background. How have you found yourself at Chargefox, and what was your journey to get here?
Yeah, it's a bit of a long story. I'm in my midlife crisis almost, 5 years off 50. But I've actually been passionate about cars and technology since I was a kid. In my early 20s, I imported a Toyota MR2 Turbo from Japan, which I highly modified for track days, put roll cage in bucket seats and even a set of track tyres. I actually lived in Tokyo for 2 years after that to try and experience the future. Wasn't disappointed. Their mobile phones back in the early 2000s were incredible, made us look pretty archaic. But after the iPhone came out in 2007 and I moved back to Australia, I started working in the telco industry actually, and I witnessed the demise of Nokia, Motorola, BlackBerry being pushed out by Apple and Samsung. After that, though, I moved into the energy industry probably in the early 2010s in my 30s and joined Simply Energy, which is now called Engie, a French company. It was also undergoing massive technological disruption from rooftop solar coming into market back then. So that was really interesting seeing that come into Australia in a big way. But I joined AGL probably about 7 years after that in 2017, managing their first electric car plan. It was called $1 a day for unlimited home charging. It was a bit of a captain's call from the previous CEO. And that was my first experience working with electric vehicles. Ended up buying one a year later, a BMW i3 in 2018, which my wife still drives today. She loves that car. Told me we can't sell it.
Awesome.
And we mostly charged that from rooftop solar at home and the Tesla Powerwall that we chucked in 2017. But after realizing that this EV disruption, if you like, was going to have a big impact in Australia, I realized a lot of that impact was going to be in the distribution space with the DNSP. So I joined Gemina, which is actually my local energy distributor in Victoria here. And I helped work on an ARENA-funded trial called EV Grid that was in partnership with a bunch of other DNSPs. Also got to work with JetCharge, which were our technology partner, and really understand some home charging behaviors. But after that trial finished, working for a regulated monopoly was probably not, the best place for a long-term career for me personally. So I moved into the RACV EV team and started to learn a lot about the auto clubs. It was a more competitive market, but they do have, inter-club relationships, which is awesome. And I got a second car, which actually got rid of our diesel SUV. I replaced that with a Tesla Model 3 Performance at the end of last year. So we became an EV-only household. Also got the latest update the other week from software over the air with FSD, so the car now drives itself, which is unbelievable. And then a few months ago, I joined Chargefox as the head of partner success, essentially to manage the relationship back with the auto clubs and also who are our shareholders, and also work closely with the hardware partners and installation partners like JetCharge.
Okay, a lot to take in there. I want to go way back to the beginning there. You started off by basically telling us that you're a petrol head.
Correct.
I think if you were importing your own car, you're modifying your cars, spending time on the track, that actually takes me back to my late teenage years where that was my dream. And then budgets in my early 20s meant that I never went down that path. But I don't know, it sounds like you've had a pretty about-face turn going from being passionate about turbo cars and track days to, fast forward to now being passionate about EVs.
It's absolutely correct. I was definitely a petrol head. I guess you can't say that now driving an EV, but my wife thought it was quite ironic because I told her I'd never sell the MR2 Turbo when we got married back in 2013. And then after joining AGL and buying that i3, it just changed my life. I said, this is the future. I need to get rid of this petrol car. And yeah, it was getting a bit old anyway, the MR2. But yeah, I think experiencing an EV for the first time back then, that silent acceleration, instant torque, just the clean sort of, I guess, experience of driving an EV, no gear changing, that sort of thing. It was like being in something completely different. And the regenerative braking was probably the main one, actually. Just felt amazing.
So give us an idea. The i3's got 7 years on it now. What's the battery look like? Any degradation to speak of?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I guess this is one of those myths that a lot of people have on EVs. And I've been asked many over the last few years, many times around how long do they last? Do you have to replace the battery after 5 years when the warranty runs out, or 8 years, whatever it is? And the batteries cost more than the car's worth, etc. But with the BMW i3, it's actually a 2017 model. We bought it as an ex-demo with 3,000 Ks on it. And that's only got a 30 kilowatt hour battery. So it's equivalent to a modern day effectively. I did a test on the battery the other week, and it's got about 14% battery degradation, which is actually pretty good. So its range was about 200 kilometers brand new. And so now it's dropped about 14%. And I guess what I've been researching with EVs more broadly, especially the ones today with modern batteries, they generally have about 2% battery degradation per year. So if you work it out that way, after 25 years, you're going to lose half the battery's original capacity, which if you look at car ownership in Australia, you're lucky to have a car for 7 years. The average might go up to maybe 15 years if you really want to hold on to it. But people keeping cars for 25 years is probably not much of a thing anymore. And the battery generally today will outlast the car.
Yeah, well, usually if they're keeping it for 25 years, they're rebuilding the engine once or twice in that time.
Well, having said that, my parents still have their 1992 80 series Land Cruiser, which does blow a bit of smoke, and I'm trying to get them to buy an EV.
It's if you think about the range on, not even the top of the line EVs that are out at the moment, but pretty mass consumer market cars, 400, 450 kilometers range. In 10 years' time, those are still going to be valuable runabouts for a second-hand driver or a third-hand driver. Or, of course, even more likely is that those batteries will have found their way into grid-scale batteries or portable batteries for events. And by the time that happens, there's probably applications that we can't even think of right now that will be very, very useful, and also that will provide good return when those batteries are purchased by someone who's going to repurpose it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good second life applications coming through for EVs. Also recycling. I've heard you can recycle up to 95% of lithium-ion batteries. So that's pretty incredible. You can't recycle the petrol, gets burnt through your tank. So yeah, it's amazing tech.
Great to hear your backstory there, Rohan. Some of the biggest names in the retail space, a network provider, now a DC fast charging company. It sounds like you've kind of hit multiple different aspects. So you're a great person for us to have on the pods. Can you give us a bit of an overview of Chargefox for someone listening who may not be familiar with their services?
Yeah, sure. So Chargefox was a startup back in 2017, which isn't that long ago. It was effectively pioneered to be a fast charging network in Australia to connect capital cities together. It was actually acquired by the auto clubs who were early investors in Chargefox. They purchased Chargefox via Australian Motoring Services, which is an entity on behalf of all the clubs. That was back in 2022. But effectively, it's Chargefox's market aggregation platform. So as part of that sale to the auto clubs, they sold all the hardware that they originally installed in site locations like that RACV and NRMA and others now own and operate. So we're effectively today, we're like an Airbnb, the same way people look for accommodation on that platform. And we connect effectively people who are driving EVs with people who own and operate EV charging, both public and private. So we've got about 5,000 plugs on our network, about 50-50 are public and private. But we're 100% Australian owned, which is great. We love that. We have an in-house software development team. We have a contact center located in Melbourne that's 24/7 for drivers who get stuck with a cable plugged into a charger or whatever they might be experiencing.
Maybe give us a bit of an idea. You said about 5,000 plugs and about 50-50 split public and private. I think anyone who drives an EV in Australia probably knows of Chargefox and probably even has the app on their phone. So those are public chargers. People might see them at petrol stations, side of the M1. But what are the applications for private chargers?
Yeah, so private chargers is more for your fleets. So we also have a lot of fleet customers we work with, and it basically allows them to use their fleet vehicle for both public and private charging, like at workplace, for example. So for that product, we have RFID cards primarily that we use, and we issue them that get it aligned with the vehicle. So as soon as they tap on for a public charging session, it gets attributed back to that organization, and they can even track it from a private workstation at their workplace. So they can really monitor the utilization of that vehicle, almost like an original petrol diesel car with the fleet card kind of thing.
So I read here, Rohan, that there's 300,000 users on Chargefox, or maybe more than that since that figure was written, which is a pretty staggering number. I think that can't be too far off the number of EVs on the road. So the Chargefox must have such a close eye on driver behavior, even the sign-up rate or the amount of users joining Chargefox each month is probably a good pulse check on the EV adoption in Australia. Have you found that to be the case? And are there any trends there that you're seeing in terms of uptake that you're able to share?
Yeah, sure. So it's a great call out. So the number of people that have downloaded the Chargefox mobile app, which is our primary interface for all drivers to find and use charging in Australia, is well over 300,000 now, which is almost on par with how many EVs have been sold in Australia. So we'd like to say that almost 95% of people that have bought an EV in Australia have downloaded the Chargefox app, which is incredible. So we are the largest, I guess, mobile app in Australia for EV charging that people use. And we're onboarding, I guess, at a rate of around 10,000 new users every month downloading the app, which kind of aligns with, new EV sales in Australia, incrementally going up. And we've got, lots of active users, of course. We've got amazing partners like Woolworths who have EV charging in their local stores. Like the local one in my Heidelberg Woolworths has 16 parking bays, and they're on Chargefox. That people that arrive at Woolies, they might not be looking for EV charging, but they suddenly come across it, and to use it, they need to download the app or use an RFID card, etc. So they become quickly aware that this is how you use the EV charging infrastructure.
It's interesting. If I reflect on my own personal experience with Chargefox, and the initial times were kind of very similar to what you said about the Heidelberg chargers. There was the local supermarket that had free charging, and it was operated by Chargefox. So I'd go and plug in every week almost. You would see my user coming in and charging up on every Sunday afternoon at about 2:00. But now do most 99% of my charging in the garage at home. And I probably would come across a Chargefox station here and there on longer trips, which might be once every couple of months. Are you seeing like these types of user behaviors becoming more prominent from, there must be thousands and thousands of charging sessions every month that you guys can now analyze?
Yeah, it's a wealth of data, and that data, I guess, can be really helpful to our install partners and site hosts, or what they call charge point operators, CPOs. Love acronyms in the energy and EV space. So those CPOs are always looking for where to put another charger next. And I guess our data set is incredible in terms of we can see with the highest utilized sites. Like, for example, the RACV site at Airport West is one of the highest utilized sites in Australia. It's in a prime location near a shopping centre. It's near the airport, near main roads, and it gets a lot of utilisation at that site, which is fantastic. And we do get, I guess, data-wise, we've seen last year, I'm just looking at the data here, 150,000 charging sessions in June last year. This year, June, just gone by, we've had 300,000. So it's doubled in terms of number of charging sessions last year versus this year.
Great. I wanted to throw some thinking, like obviously on this podcast before, we've had EV on here, EVX, who have taken, I would say, a different strategic path than Chargefox in the public charging space, because they've decided to build, own and operate the charging stations along with providing the software. And I guess the thing that makes Chargefox different is that you've really focused on providing that platform software and being able to enable a whole range of chargers. So I imagine the team at Chargefox is probably heavy on the tech side and people building all of those kind of features and things to make sure that you guys have, the best app, the most user-friendly app. Is that a fair summation, Rohan?
Yeah, absolutely. So driver first is our, focus, that we want to make sure the driver experience is well catered for. It starts with the mobile app, with finding where chargers are. We love that we're agnostic to, location, hardware, even vehicle to some extent. So we're a platform where we can make it easier for drivers to find and use chargers. We also have been going into this, what they call roaming space, which is where all the chargers historically on Chargefox we have had hosted directly. So those chargers point straight to our platform. However, with the other ones you mentioned, like other companies and other networks, like EVX being an example, they have their own platform and their own systems. But if we could point traffic to other CPOs and other networks like that, then that's a form of roaming, which we actually already do that for NRMA. And being an agnostic player in the market, hardware-wise and site-wise, we can enable that. So we're having some really good conversations with some of the key players in the market at the moment, and hopefully we'll be able to announce some news fairly soon on that.
That's really exciting to hear, because that was my very first pain point after buying the BYD Auto 3 is on the drive home. I was driving it back from the dealership in Sydney up to northern New South Wales, and I think I needed to download by the end of the trip 5 different apps, and you almost need a little army of apps to keep you going on those long trips. And in the long run, that's just not user friendly. And so I could see that, if I was, it's great that you've used NRMA as the example as a part owner. That was obviously easier to collaborate with them. But if you can demonstrate success, then I can't see any reason why some of those other public charging companies wouldn't want to take traffic from you if they can. A lot of these stations sit there dormant for a long period of time. So I think, any chance to improve the utilization rate must seem attractive to those companies.
Yeah, absolutely. It's incremental traffic effectively that we can drive to their charging stations. So it's good conversations to have. And we already see that it's been fairly successful in Europe as well. In fact, they have a bunch of different methods over there as well.
So it sounds like the data is pretty useful for picking up on changes in behavior, for tracking trends. You've given us an example of how that sort of influences decision making for the present, how you can add more value to CPOs and obviously increase the value for Chargefox as well. What does it tell us about the slightly more distant future? What do the trends predict in 1 to 5 years?
Oh, it's such a moving market, isn't it? I think, in terms of EV charging a bit more broadly and integration back with the grid and that sort of thing, it's ultimately trying to reduce the cost to charge, even though charging is a lot cheaper than refueling a petrol tank these days. It's something that we're focused on, is how do we really make sure that EV drivers are getting the best price for charging and incentivized for the right behaviors. So pricing strategy is really important. And something we did introduce, I think it was earlier this year or maybe late last, was idle fees, which is, adding a new fee to a service is not necessarily something people jump up and down about and get excited and applaud you for. But to be honest, when we added idle fees, drivers thanked us. They said, this is amazing to have idle fees on particular DC chargers that people want to use for fast charging on a road trip, because ultimately what EV drivers want is accessible, reliable EV charging infrastructure. And if people are filling up their EV, so to speak, and it's fully charged, but they're in the cafe for another half an hour or something, and that charger becomes unusable, they want that car to be moved as quick as possible so the next driver can then move in line and charge their vehicle. So idle fees does exactly that.
It could be the only example ever of an additional fee for a service-based business being well received by your users.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, we can't fix the icing issues if people park a internal combustion engine car over the top of an EV dedicated spot. Yeah, we can't do a lot about that. But yeah, in terms of overstaying, as they sort of call it. But I guess the other fundamental thing, it's a bit of maybe unknown to people that don't drive an EV, but charging up to 80% at a DC charger is really important. And if you can then move on, that would be a lot better for everyone, including yourself, because charging from, let's say, 10 or 20% up to 80 takes about the same time to go from 80 to 100%, even on a DC charger.
Particularly, I think that's true for the Teslas on the lithium NMC batteries. The lithium iron phosphate batteries seem to charge a bit quicker, up to 90%, but certainly slow down in that last hurdle. And so I'm interested to know, Rohan, if you have any data that you can share in the strata apartment space. It's an area that's a big focus for us here at Solar Choice. We do a lot of feasibility studies. We know obviously there's a very small number of apartment buildings in Australia that have level 2 charging full stop, but those that do, a high percentage of them have a solution like Chargefox to enable the billing back to the body corporate account to reimburse for particular owners' usage, also load management solutions and things like that. So is that something that you guys keep an eye on?
Yeah, we have done a bit of that. It's not our sort of core, but certainly we have provided services like that to strata and owners corporations where they want to enable EV charging. Generally, the parking bay, if it's a dedicated bay for the owner, that can be installed by the owner, and that's sort of obviously at their cost to put a charger in. But then we can add that because the energy would come out of the building corporate energy account. So we can then provide that billing service effectively to enable that cost to be recouped and passed back through to the owner's corporation. And yeah, we can provide services like that, which is really good. And there's companies that are really leaning into that, which is great, to try and make it easier to install EV charging in buildings. I've even seen people using smart power points effectively, rather than putting in a 7 kilowatt charger, for example. It might just be a 2 kilowatt charger or 1.8, whatever it is, a PowerPoint one, 10 amps. And that just has less impact on the infrastructure of that building, because the last thing a building wants to have to do is upgrade grid connection, which is the expensive part, to allow for high-speed AC charging across all their parking bays, which can be challenging. So we find that, the average Aussie does about 35 Ks a day. So the myth here is that you can actually charge from a PowerPoint at home. And I did this for the first 3 or 4 years of that i3. You can charge at home overnight when you're sleeping for 8 or 10 hours, 6 hours if you don't have much sleep. And the next day, your car's pretty much full from that 35 Ks a day from a PowerPoint. So the fast charger at home, or when I say fast AC charger, I mean like a 7 kilowatt single phase or maybe up to 22 kilowatt 3-phase. They're really good if you wanted to upgrade your home charger to charge off solar in a shorter window, or an overnight off-peak, if you had a shorter time period to charge. That's when it really works well.
Yeah, I think I'm glad you said that, because I've been through that journey myself. I initially charged off a wall plug, and you're right, like there's more than enough power when people get home after work until the next morning for 95% of people to recharge back to 100% if they want to before they set off the next morning. The challenge is when you plug into the wall is that you're probably going to get home at 5:30 or 6, and you're going to be charging off peak rates until 9 or 10 p.m, depending on where you are in Australia. And you don't have the ability to take advantage of some of these more dynamic EV plans. For example, there's some where you can get free power between 11 and 2 p.m, or you might have solar where you're generating free power anyway. And usually that is for that short window in the middle of the day. So although my car's not in the carport during the day, I can pretty much charge it back to 100% on the weekends in those free windows. And that's more than recoup the cost to get, spend a couple of grand on an EV charger already. So there is a good case to get fast charging, and it's my belief that most EV owners should get there. And although it's pretty common not to at the beginning.
I think the other one I did early on with the home charging from a PowerPoint was just buying a $30 smart plug that I could, time base to turn on and off, etc. And that was able to then map out the off-peak period and only charge during that window.
Great, Rohan. I might throw some rapid fire questions at you. So just to get your initial thoughts on, so don't think about it too much, but starting with, what's your favorite EV myth to bust?
Probably the battery one is the main one I'd flag, that people think that the battery warranty is when the battery dies. So if they see battery warranty 8 years, they think, in 8 years' time, that car's dead. That is a complete myth. It's like any warranty. You get a warranty on any product for 12 months or 2 years, and you keep it for 20 years and it's still going.
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's also like a natural observation to look at a warranty length and assume and make that false assumption that it would die thereafter. But you're right, there's lots of other examples out there in the market. If something's well looked after, that it will last for a long time. So next one, of the recently launched EVs, as a former petrol head and automotive geek, what's caught your eye?
I actually really like the Pulsar 4. A bit weird how it didn't have a rear window. Really nice car. I think that technology was really good. They had a lot of integration with third parties to build that car.
Yeah, that's a good one. And of the future EV technology that, is out there in the news, that's on the way, what gets you the most excited?
I think I would have said FSD would be something that I know a lot of Tesla owners have been waiting for years on. And I really feel for the people out there who were very early adopters and got hardware 3. But hopefully that gets solved fairly soon, or they get upgraded to hardware 4. V2G is probably the biggest one I keep hearing, coming from the energy background as well when I was over in that land. But even now in the EV space, on the other side, vehicle to grid is kind of the savior of enabling you to not just buy a car, but buy a huge battery on wheels that you can use for multiple things and get a cost benefit from.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So the topic we always cover on this podcast, and we can talk more about it. But your first comment there on FSD, or full self-driving, is a topical one. As I'm here in the States at the moment, you just go past so many of the Jaguar
I-Pace
Waymo cars. Yeah, the I-Pace and they've got the cameras everywhere and there's no one in the driver's seat. I think a lot of Australians don't realise that self-driving cars are basically a thing, and they're driving all around the States at the moment. You can get what's called a Waymo, which is about 20-30% cheaper than an Uber because there's no driver in it. It's very exciting.
Oh, it's incredible technology, and it is very safe. Like, I think that's the main message. It's not flawless, that there'll never be a fatality from autonomous vehicle. Like, that's not possible. There's always going to be things that happen with any technology, but ultimately, if it's safer than a human driver by a long shot, then I think that's absolutely moving in the right direction. The funny bit I saw actually recently on Waymo was a police car in the US pulled over a Waymo because it did an illegal U-turn.
Right.
And they tried ticketing the driver, but there wasn't one. So, and I don't think it had a passenger at the time either, but it did pull over when it got, flagged by the police. But yeah, the police couldn't interact with the vehicle at all and struggled to ticket it. And there was a bit of backlash around they should find the company and how does that work when there's no driver? How do you lose demerit points? Who's responsible for that? So it's a new world when you think about driverless vehicles.
What an interesting dilemma.
Yeah. These are the problems that need to be solved, right? We're seeing it happen live. I also saw that coverage, and I think that the response basically was that the regulatory changes are already in the works. And it's things like the operators being given a 1 to 2 minute window to be able to tell the car to change behavior if it's in an area it's not allowed to be, or they have to have a 24/7 line being manned so that if there are complaints or problems from law enforcement, that they can respond accordingly. So it's hard to prepare for every possible challenge before it happens, but quick responses for such quickly emerging technology is what we need.
It was a good story, that one.
And Rohan, to loop back to your comments on V2G, and we're all very excited about that and we share your sentiment. Do you see Chargefox, the platform, playing a big role in V2G? I think some of the early pilot studies have been, within people's homes where the cars are parked overnight and parked for longer periods, which seems natural. But do you think that will evolve into that public charging sphere? And I guess you guys also have a big exposure to that business fleet space as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's on our roadmap, absolutely. And it's a sort of bit of a watch and see at the minute because there's nothing really available just yet for us to get into. But I think going forward in the future, you'll see some incentives from V2G. And so I could imagine a future where you could find out on Chargefox that there's a charger that's gone into almost negative pricing because that area of the network needs more capacity. And if you've got a car that you can plug in and either charge if there's excess solar on the grid and they need to absorb that, or discharge and go back to the grid to help that grid and get paid for that, there could be a price premium attached to that. So you might plug in your car at, let's use Airport West again, for example, that might be grid constrained and it's at risk of a blackout or a brownout. And you get a bunch of EVs that go over there going, there's a high price for feeding your energy back to the grid. So I think there'll be price incentives like that in the future where you will be able to use V2G in its true form for getting paid to charge or discharge to support the network.
And I also think back to an application, and this is just me thinking laterally and probably a bit demonstrating my lack of knowledge. But in a recent cyclone we had up in the Gold Coast, northern New South Wales area, where we lost power for like 2 or 3 days in a row. Because the BYD has a PowerPoint plug-in, I run a long extension cable down to the kitchen so I could at least plug the fridge in so all the food didn't go off. And then my neighbour saw what I was doing and asked if they could plug in as well. And there was enough power there that, we could both run our fridges probably for a couple of weeks without the battery going dead. And it makes me think that, maybe in some of these more isolated areas, maybe there is hundreds, in the future thousands of EVs parked in garages in these areas that have lost power. So maybe there's a possibility for all of those EVs to come to the rescue and power local networks. Obviously, they don't want the power going through the lines while they're trying to fix it, but maybe they can isolate certain areas.
I'd say that's a really good call out. And that's obviously a great example of V2L, vehicle to load, which is, I guess, a bit different from the V2G, V2H, the other acronyms that keep bouncing around. So vehicle to load is what we'd call a standalone power system where you've got the battery like in your car and you've got an external appliance or device, like you said, that you're connecting like your fridge, and you have a direct connection to that has nothing to do with the grid connection. That technology, as you are well aware, exists today, not in every car, unfortunately. I did hear Tesla are going to add that to the new Model Y Performance in the US, and they might roll it out to others going forward, which would be amazing. I know Tesla owners have been crying out for V2L for some time. BYD and Polestar and others have it today, which is almost a reason to buy some of those cars, is that capability. If you go camping, especially with some of these plug-in hybrid utes that are coming out, the BYD Shark, that one's a great car. They're just some amazing use cases using your car to power your campsite or power through a blackout. And when I was at Gemina, we actually used to send out portable batteries, like a generator, but not a petrol one, a battery one. And they used to be distributed for people that had a planned outage. Their power might have gone off for 6 hours for some planned maintenance, and they were flagged as a life support customer. So they needed electricity for critical things at home. And so Gemina would offer them a portable battery pack that they could use to power their fridge and their life support systems and whatnot. And now these days, you've got this massive battery with an EV that we could, a distributor could send out EVs into a street and power multiple houses like your example just before, which is amazing.
Or even just offer the neighbor who has a Tesla anyway, I don't know, $1 a kilowatt hour to send a cable across the fence, or, there could be a quick win there.
Definitely. We're getting pretty close to the end of our time. I think we've covered some great topics here. Is there anything else we want to touch on before we wrap up?
No, it's been a great chat. Thank you very much for all the questions and conversation. I think it's a very fast-moving industry in the EV space and the charging space. And yeah, I could probably talk about it all day.
Thanks for coming on. Appreciate your time.
No worries at all.
Thanks, Rohan.
See ya.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and make sure you share an episode with someone that you think might enjoy it. Leave us a review, leave us a comment. It really does make a difference for us. And if you need a quote for anything related to home electrification, solar, batteries, heat pumps, aircon, and of course EV charging, head to solarchoice.net.au to get instant quotes from pre-vetted installers. See you next month.